There is a shirt on you right now, and it is older than you think. Not the shirt, the habit. The habit of wrapping a dead animal or a woven plant around a naked primate and calling it Tuesday. That habit is roughly 170,000 years old, which is strange because for most of the time there have been humans, there were no clothes at all. We were a bald, shivering, hairless ape walking around with absolutely nothing on for hundreds of thousands of years, and we were fine. So here is the question nobody asks while getting dressed. When did a naked animal decide to start wearing things? And how does anyone know the date when not one single thread from back then survived? You cannot carbon date a sweater that rotted into nothing 2,000 centuries ago. There is no first coat in a museum. There is no receipt. There is, however, a witness. It is about 3 millimeters long. It has been living in human clothing this entire time, and it has been keeping the date in its DNA the whole way down. We figured out when humans got dressed by interrogating the bug that moved in once we did. Start with the part that should bother you more than it does. Humans are bald. Not bald like a man losing his hair, bald like a plucked chicken with delusions. Somewhere around 1 million years ago, our ancestors lost the fur that every other primate on Earth still wears for free, and they lost it long, long before anyone thought to put anything back on. We know roughly when, because of a gene that controls skin color. Bare skin in the African sun needs dark pigment to survive, and the version of that pigment gene that does the job dates to somewhere past 1 million years ago, which means the skin underneath had already gone naked by then. Fur first, then nothing, then 1 million years of nothing. So the textbook story has the order backwards. The story goes, it got cold, so humans invented clothes. But the cold came much later. The naked ape stood around in the warm African afternoon, fully exposed, for the longest single chapter of the entire human story, and got dressed nowhere near the end of it. The real question was never, who invented fashion? It is, why does a bald animal that did fine naked for 1 million years suddenly need a second skin it can take off? And the answer is hiding on something even smaller than the question. Here is the trick, and it is genuinely beautiful. There are two kinds of louse that live on a human, and they are almost the same animal, except for one detail. The head louse lives in your hair. It is built to grip a hair shaft, and it will die on bare skin. The body louse looks nearly identical, lives on the same blood, and yet it does not live on the body at all. It lives in your clothes. It crawls out to feed and crawls back into the seams to lay its eggs. Take away the clothing, and the body louse has no home and no future. It cannot exist. So follow that. The body louse is a head louse that, at some point in the deep past, climbed off the scalp, moved into the new fabric apartment a human was wearing, and never came back. It is, biologically, a parasite that evolved to inhabit clothing, which means it could not possibly have appeared one single day before there were clothes for it to appear in. The louse is a fossil of a behavior. The garment rotted, the tenant kept breeding, and the tenant kept a clock. Read the genetic difference between the head louse and the clothing louse. Count the mutations backward at the rate they accumulate, and you get a date for when the two split, which is the date a human first wore clothing reliably enough to grow a permanent infestation in it. In 2011, a team at the Florida Museum of Natural History ran exactly that, and the lice gave up a number, roughly 170,000 years ago. There is no thread. There never was a thread. We dated the clothes by reading the parasite's eviction notice from its previous address. Now hold that number against the other dates, because this is where it gets ridiculous. 170,000 years ago, humans had clothes. But the first sewing needle, an actual eyed needle, the technology for tailored clothing, does not show up until around 40,000 years ago in Siberia. So for something like 130,000 years, humans had clothing and no way to sew it. They were wearing what was essentially a hide thrown over a shoulder and clutched, like a man at a toga party who only just learned about the party. And the timing is worse than that. The big migrations into genuinely cold latitudes, the part of the story where humans actually needed insulation to not die, those came tens of thousands of years after the clothing did. Which means clothing did not arrive to solve the cold. The cold showed up to a problem that had already been solved, found us dressed, and took the credit. The coat you reach for when it's freezing was invented in a warm place by people who weren't cold for no urgent reason at all, and the Ice Age just inherited it. There is an honest wrinkle here, and it is the one place this story shrugs. That 170,000 number is a molecular estimate, not a tombstone. Read a clock written in mutations, and you get a wide margin, which is why the same kind of work has landed anywhere from 80,000 years ago to 170. So pick the latest, most cautious number on offer, the 80,000, and the punchline survives untouched, still tens of thousands of years before the needle, still long before the cold. The dates argue about the decimal. They do not argue about the order, dressed first, freezing later. The excuse came after the habit. So if it wasn't the cold, and it wasn't the needle, and it definitely wasn't decency, naked apes are not famous for their modesty. What was the first piece of clothing actually for? The answer is the same one the louse already told you. The shirt is not a garment, it is a habitat. A bald animal lost its fur, which means it lost the warm, humid, sheltered half-inch of air that fur traps against the skin, the microclimate every furry animal carries around for free. Clothing is that microclimate, rebuilt by hand. It is a strip of portable weather you wear, warm, slightly damp, climate-controlled real estate hauled around on the outside of the body. The reason a louse could move in is that, from the louse's point of view, a human in a shirt is not a person. It is land, beachfront property that walks to work, which reframes the whole thing you are doing right now. Modesty, fashion, the entire moral apparatus of what you are and are not allowed to wear. All of that is paint, applied tens of thousands of years late, onto something that started as pure climate engineering. The first human who wrapped up was not being decent and was not being stylish. That ancestor was building a tiny weather system to stand inside, because the body had stopped making its own. Everything since, the seams, the buttons, the dress codes, the dread of showing up underdressed, is decoration on a portable swamp we invented to replace the fur we threw away. So the next time you get dressed, you are not covering up. You are doing maintenance on a 170,000-year-old workaround for a body that fired its own fur and never grew it back. You are reinstalling the weather. And somewhere in the history of those seams, a 3mm tenant has been riding along, keeping perfect time, waiting for someone to finally ask what year the apartment was built. We threw away our fur, missed it immediately, and have spent 2,000 centuries faking it. And the only one who knew the exact date was the bug.